Well, Gopal, thank you very much. I can tell you one practice that I'm definitely taking home with me from Amplify, and that's the speaker buddy idea. Every speaking engagement I take from now, non-negotiable, speaker buddy written right into the contract, and you've set the standard. So
you can fly me over wherever you need. I'll be your speaker buddy.
I just love the idea, and to build on your science comment, if you ever get the opportunity to create your own title, I highly recommend it. I chose, just like Annalee chose Chief Catalyst, I chose it because it reminds me every day what my role is. And I remember back, like you do, to my high school and college chemistry class, where the catalyst was the reagent that got the reaction started and then got out of the way. And I like that reminder, because I think in the 21st century, that's what a leader's job is, to get the reaction started and then to get out of the way so that people can be their best selves and deliver their best work. And if you're a dinosaur like me, that grew up in big corporations, you need that reminder all the time. And the other thing I like from the science lesson is that I seem to remember that the catalyst does not get used up in the reaction. It lives to enable another reaction after that. And I kind of like that part of it too. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm really enjoying Amplify. The sessions have been absolutely amazing. Is there a pool, an office pool, on how many times speakers have used the word innovation? We're into day 2 now, but I've listened to a lot of the presentations, and there's a lot of talk about innovation. I'm an innovation junkie, as I imagine a lot of you in this room. When you're an innovation junkie, you always think that there's a better way. You always think there's a better way. It's a blessing and a curse, isn't it? It's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you're always thinking of how to improve someone's life, to create solutions for everyday problems in the real world. But it's also a curse for the same reason, because the job is never, ever done. Because if you're an innovation junkie, right, the minute you complete something, you don't take long to celebrate it, do you? You're right on to improving it. And it doesn't matter whether it's a small thing. It could be as simple as the 9 o'clock queue at the elevator bank, coming up this morning, and in your head saying, there's got to be a better way to do this. We do it at the supermarket checkout lines. No matter what we do as innovation junkies, we're always trying to improve everything. And I was quite pleased today that there was a workaround. We actually had an express elevator to enhance our experience to be able to get here. But more importantly, the big things. We take the same kind of attitude towards. For me, it's in the States, driving by our urban public schools and wanting to cry and saying, how did we allow this to happen, right? There must be a better way. But I'll take the blessing part of it all the time. It's great to be an innovation junkie. What I would like to talk with you about today is I want to unbundle this word transformation. We're throwing this word around a lot, right? I love the theme of Amplify, where it says shift happened. I love that, right? Shift happened. We all know that. If I asked all of you, we don't spend a lot of time as innovation junkies admiring the problem. That's why I like to be at events like this. We're generally optimistic people. We want to find solutions to solve the problem. You go to a lot of other sessions where there's not a lot of innovation junkies, and we spend a lot of time admiring the problem and whining about it. You guys don't. You legitimately want to find solutions, and I think that that's a really good thing. But I have to say that we really have to unbundle this word, because the second part of that is transformation required. And I think if I asked all of you, you would agree with that. That this new century that we're in right now screams for transformation, not for tweaks. And we all know that. But yet, when we look around, I'm going to tell you, we've become a world full of tweakers. We love to tweak things. We love to take safe chances. We love to change things just a little bit. We love to improve the way things work today a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. But if we really want to focus on transformation, doing things in a completely new and different way, which we all think is required in the 21st century, we have to unbundle that word. What does that really mean? How do you go from tweaks to transformation? Because as I travel around the world and visit with executives across lots and lots of industries, they use the right words. You know, you'll hear the CEOs and senior management and business unit directors, they throw out the words like transformation. We need to be bold. You know, we need to think outside of the box. It's one I particularly don't like, right? But when you watch what happens after the CEO goes back, you know, to his or her office, it ends up being incremental change. Why? Because line executives want to improve the way today's business model works. They want to improve the performance of today's business model. They're not really that interested in creating entirely new business models, right? They want to improve the performance of today's. But yet we live in a period that absolutely requires transformation and entire new business models. Let me share a quick story with you. I'm hoping you're all familiar with a company called Blockbusters, the video store rental company, primarily in the States. I started my book, The Business Model Innovation Factory, with this story about Blockbusters, because I think it exemplifies the need for changing business models. So Blockbusters at its peak had 5,000 stores. 5,000 stores. Its value proposition was very simple. You could go to the corner, you could pick up initially a video cassette, and you could bring it home and watch a movie in the comfort of your own home. What a great proposition. And we all went. We all went to the corner. We could all tell you exactly where the Blockbuster was that was closest to our home. I mean, I can see it in my mind's eye. Well, what happened? A new technology came out called DVDs. DVDs. It was very predictable. It was a very predictable new technology. We'd already figured out how to compress music onto a CD. That had been going on for years, and it was only a matter of time until we figured out how to compress a movie onto a DVD. So what did Blockbusters do with that new technology? They did what most companies do. They saw it as an incremental improvement to their existing business model. They put it right on the shelf next to the video cassette. So now I could come into the store, and it was up to me as the customer. Take the video cassette, take the DVD, right? That was how they used the technology. Well, a guy by the name of Reed Hastings actually rented from Blockbuster the movie Apollo 13. And like many of us, and he didn't return it on time. And it turned out a lot of Blockbuster's revenue came from late fees, because there were a lot of people like us who didn't watch the movie as quickly as we needed to, and they ended up paying a late fee. Well, Reed Hastings got pissed off that he had to pay a late fee. And so he said, maybe there's a better way, right? Maybe I don't need all the bricks and mortar of all these Blockbuster stores. Maybe I could mail the DVD directly to you at home. Even a better proposition, because now you don't even have to drive to the store, right? So they used the technology in a disruptive way to create Netflix. Now, what do you think Blockbusters did? Blockbusters, was the 5,000 store behemoth. So they said, Netflix is a niche player. They will never amount to anything. We don't even have to worry about them. And they just kept adding more stores, adding more stores. Reed Hastings and his team even went down to Dallas, which is where Blockbuster's headquarters was, and said to Blockbuster's leadership, what if we partnered? What if we partnered? You are great at store operations. We are good online. No one would ever touch us if we combined our assets. And what do you think Blockbusters did? Blockbuster said, you're a niche player, you're never going to amount to anything, and kicked him out of the office. And of course, Reed and his team ended up doing what I coined in my book, Netflixing Blockbuster. Literally took them down to their knees. Blockbuster is now bankrupt. Billions and billions of dollars were lost. Why? Because Blockbusters couldn't imagine a different business model. It was so stuck in its existing business model that it didn't see its way clear to experiment with a different business model. And when I talk about being Netflixed, I use that to describe every organization in every industry today is vulnerable to being Netflixed, right? And if you don't think you are, you're probably not aware of the disruptors that are out there that are trying to change the business model. right? So they're not trying to compete with you for share. I talk about the difference from share takers to market makers. Most of the world is comprised of share takers, right? What do? We define a market, we define a competitive set, we know what our current market share is, we work really hard to maintain it, and then we figure out how we can improve our current business model to take one more share point away from the competitive set. Now, there's nothing wrong with share taking. That's what most business models do. They try to increase their competitiveness to take more share. Market makers don't do that. Market makers redefine the marketplace. They create entire new business models, right? They're not share takers, they're market makers. And when you're a market maker, you define the market, you lead the market, right? And that's what Netflix did. And the reason I like the Netflix story is because it's not over. Because of course now, where do we get our movies from? You know, we stream them online. So even Netflix is vulnerable to being Netflixed. So the job is never done. You always have to be worried about what the next business model is. These business models don't last as long as they used to. It used to be, in the industrial era, that you ran a single business model for your entire career. Most CEOs today have never had to change their business model. Most of their colleagues, their peers, have never had to change their business model. Today's and tomorrow's CEO, I believe, are going to have to transform, significantly change their business models 2 or 3 times over the course of their career. That's a very different career, right? Where do you learn how to do that? Where do you learn how to completely reinvent your business model? So that's what I'd like to talk with you about for the few minutes that I have, and then have a dialogue with you about that. I believe the imperative is R&D for new business models. Just the way you think about R&D for new products and new technology today, or new services if you're in a service business, right? I think you have to add another arm called R&D for new business models. You should be experimenting with new business models all the time. And that's different than improving the performance of today's business model. You should do both. Leaders in the 21st century are going to have to pedal the bicycle of today's business model while simultaneously imagining, prototyping, and testing tomorrow's business model. It's a new leadership challenge, but I believe if you don't do that, you're going to be vulnerable to being Netflix no matter what industry you're in. Let me take you through a few slides, a few questions that I'd like to make sure that I leave you with. One, can you articulate what your current business model is? Most people can, and if I ask 20 people in any company what the business model is for the company, I'll get 30 different answers. And you should expect that because, remember, you never had to change your business model before. It's been around a long time. The company's been here longer than everybody in this room, right? And it's been working off of a single business model, so you don't talk about it very much. But in a world where business models don't last as long, we've got to get facile with talking about business models, right? And being able to not only articulate what our current business model is, but begin to imagine what the next set of business models are. Is your business model sustainable? How vulnerable are you to being Netflixed or to being disrupted? And as I said, are you doing R&D for new business models? Is that part of your innovation agenda? So the good news is that this is our day. If you're an innovation junkie, I mean, this is our time, right? You can get an audience with anybody. People want fresh thinking. They want bold ideas. So if you're an innovation junkie, this is a really, really wonderful time. Lots of opportunities, right, to put our points of view forward, to get people to listen to our ideas. That's the good news. The bad news is we've completely turned it into a buzzword. I mean, full stop. Complete and total buzzword. Everybody's an innovator. Everything's an innovation. We've co-opted the language, right? All of our reports, all of our meetings, I mean, everything's about innovation. Of course, if everyone's an innovator and everything's an innovation, guess what? No one is and nothing is, right? So we have to get below these buzzwords. We have to get below these buzzwords. Let me offer a very simple definition, and you probably heard a bunch of them here from a lot of the speakers. To me, Innovation is quite simple. It's a better way to deliver value. It's a better way to deliver value. And my emphasis is on deliver value. To me, it's not an innovation until it works in the real world, until it actually solves the problem in the real world. Doesn't matter to me that you've worked in your conference rooms, and you've got a concept for innovation, or you've tested it in a lab. What matters is, did you actually solve the problem? Did it deliver value? It's very different than invention, and this is one of our problems, because we tend to conflate these two words. Most people, when they think innovation, they're thinking invention. They're thinking about a new product, a new technology. Invention's important, don't get me wrong, but it's not an innovation. Most innovation, you don't have to invent anything new. A lot of innovation is just playing with the parts, reassembling them in order to deliver value in a different way. Reed Hastings invented nothing, right? And completely took down Blockbusters. I would posture that Steve Jobs invented nothing. He took capabilities, he reassembled them, and he changed the way we enjoy music today. He created a new business model. He didn't invent anything. It wasn't about the products, although the products are cool. It was about the way they changed the way we access and enjoy music. And Sony got caught completely flat-footed by that because they couldn't get out of the way of their own business models. They're the Blockbuster of the story. They had all the parts. Sony had everything. I mean, you guys a lot of you are too young to remember. I had a Walkman. I mean, maybe some of you had a Sony Walkman. They were there early. They had all the music artists under contract in the music division. But the division presidents couldn't get along. They couldn't figure out how to play with the parts in order to change the way we enjoy music. And here comes Steve Jobs. And that's what he did. He didn't invent anything. He created a new business model. You have to separate out invention and innovation. This chart I find very helpful, and it describes a lot of what I see when I travel around and talk with companies and executives about innovation. When you start to get below the buzzwords, here's what happens. If you follow this chart, on the y-axis is product or service innovation. And that's what most innovation departments, quote unquote, do, right? They try to create better mousetraps, right, so that we can continue to drive our current business model by adding new products or services to the mix. Many organizations also work on the x-axis, which is about capability innovation, right? Having stronger and better capabilities in order to create, make, and sell the mousetrap, right? Most innovation departments, when you really look at them, are very focused on how to either deliver new product and service or strengthen today's capabilities in order to strengthen the current business model. That's a wonderful objective, right? You should absolutely be doing those things. That is not business model innovation. You will not avoid being Netflixed by doing those two things. If you want to avoid being Netflixed, you have to get up into the upper right quadrant. You have to explicitly focus on entire new business models, not just improving the one you got today. And what happens is the CEO says, create an innovation culture, right? And people that are tasked with doing that, right, don't know whether the CEO meant improve the performance of today's business model with products and capabilities, or he or she also meant experiment with entirely new business models, even those that might disrupt the core, and that's the hardest part. So I'll give you a simple definition of a business model. I have 2 slides on this. A business model is a network of capabilities and a sustainable financial model to deliver value to target customers. On the next slide, I make it even easier. It's a story of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. Most people, when they hear the word business model, think about financial model. They don't think about the value proposition or the job they're trying to do for a customer, and they don't think about the capabilities necessary in order to deliver it at scale and to do it repeatably. A business model has all 3 of those components, and you should be able to articulate your organization's business model story. You should be able to tell me how your organization creates, delivers and captures value. That's the starting point. Then what we have to do is start to say, how could we start to imagine completely new and different business models to create, deliver, and capture value? There's a lot of reasons why companies don't get this right. I won't talk about all 10 of these. Let me just pick a couple of them. At the top of the list is the CEO isn't really that interested in a new business model. They just want the current one to work better. And that's fine, as long as they're clear about it. There should be clarity to the people in the organization about what the innovation objective is. Far too many organizations that I visit, aren't explicit about the objectives of what they expect from their innovation effort. What are you building an innovation culture to do? Because the way that you create new business models is very different than the way you strengthen the current one. The way you organize around those two objectives is very different. You can't put them into the same department and expect it to get both of those objectives done, You can't use the same measurements. If I'm trying to improve today's business model, we know how to measure that. We know how to do ROI analysis. We know how to do stage gates of where certain projects are. We know how to choose amongst alternative projects. We can use traditional metrics to determine what we invest in to improve today's business model. You can't use those in the business model innovation space. You can't. It's a very different activity. I can't tell you what the ROI of an early stage business model experiment is, and anyone who says that you can is kidding you, All I can tell you is that here's an idea that of a new and different way that we could deliver value or do the job that a customer's trying to do. Give me the opportunity to play with the parts in a different way. Let me go out into the market and let me demonstrate for you that that business model has potential. Until you get it out into the market, until you get it out there and start playing with it, you don't know whether a business model is going to work. This is not a classic MBA scientist exercise. This is a back of a napkin sketch, an idea of what do we want to do differently? How can I recombine the capabilities in a different way? What new capabilities could I put in the mix that would change the way we solve the customer's problem? So I think the real challenge here is if you buy my premise that the imperative is to do both of those things, get better at today's business model and imagine, prototype, and test new business models, the next question is, how do you do that? How do you do that? So I think that organizations need a safe place. I talk about, the book is called The Business Model Innovation Factory. You can call it a sandbox, What you need is a sandbox where you can play with the parts. So that you could begin to imagine and begin to prototype and test entire new business model configurations. If Blockbuster had had a business model innovation factory or a sandbox, it's very conceivable that they would have figured out that they didn't need the bricks and mortar store and there were other ways to solve the customer's problems. They were just constrained by today's business model. If Sony had had a business model innovation factory or a sandbox where they could have played with their parts, they might have reinvented the way we enjoy music. It requires not only a sandbox with the autonomy and resource to do it, it requires very strong leadership to run interference. Because guess what? The people in the core business, they don't like it very much when you're over here designing something that might disrupt them, might cannibalize something in the core, So it requires strong leadership to do both of those things simultaneously. But if you don't, believe me, someone else is. Someone else out there is trying to figure it out. It should be you. So the question is, how do you get to the network effect faster and cheaper? We all want to get to that magic network effect where the value we get from any customer interaction exceeds the cost of attaining that customer. So the idea here is, can we get there faster and cheaper? Can we fail faster with business model ideas that might not work? A lot of the speakers have been talking about that. I like to think of it as reframing failure, because I think we've made it career limiting. I don't even like the word failure. I prefer to talk about intentional iteration. We should be trying more stuff. It's really that simple. That's my technical jargon. We need to try more stuff, and we beat that out of us, right? Because nobody wants to fail. We only want to do those projects that can demonstrate the high ROIs, the quick payback times. That's fine for strengthening today's business model. You will never, ever do the business model experiments that you need to be doing if you treat those projects the same way. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm gonna wrap up my comments. I just want to give you a little bit of sense of the how. So I created an organization called BIF, the Business Innovation Factory. We try to help leaders across the public and private sector to design and test new business models. I believe you can experiment with new business models in the real world, that we can prototype quickly, that we can prototype cheaply, not prototype products, prototype business models. Find the conditions where you can actually be in the marketplace, working with customers, trying to redefine the way value gets delivered. That's how you're going to learn what new business models are possible. We do it in 4 different labs that we run, have at any given time almost a dozen projects where we're working with companies, with foundations, with governments that know that they need to reinvent their business model and try to work with them to help them get ideas off of the whiteboard and get them onto the ground, because you can spend forever trying to analyze it. What's important here is actually getting out into the marketplace to determine what new and different business models can work. We use, a lot of the speakers over the last couple of days have been talking about design. Right? We use design thinking and process because I think it's a design exercise. Now, for me, as a scientist MBA, I had to unlearn everything that I learned all those years of my career, because business model innovation is a different exercise, right? It's a generative exercise. It's, again, taking an idea, off the back of a napkin and putting it onto the ground. That's not what I learned how to do in business school. That's what designers do. So in my organization, we have a lot of designers that are helping us imagine the way we could change the customer experience and helping us design potential new business models that we can prototype and test. My last 2 slides, these are just some of the principles that we use. You've heard a lot of this from many of the other speakers. You should design around the customer. I mean, you've heard that over and over from people that have been up here talking with you. You need to change your lens, because if you bring the lens of your current business model into the discussion, you're going to be biased, right, to do things that are consistent with your current business model. Right? If you're going to imagine a new business model, we need a different lens. And the best lens is the lens of the customer. Right? It's the lens of the customer. Understand the customer experience through their perspective. And I'm not talking about market research. Right? The first thing that happens in most companies is they go, yeah, we'll do all this ethnographic observation work, and then we'll put it on the stack of market research reports so that we can make a better decision about what to do. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is actually understand the customer experience, bring the customer into the design process. We talk about participative design. Let customers help you imagine the future that they are excited about, that they want to commit to, that they would spend money on. Bring them directly into the process. You, as executives, you sit on the edge of that table. Let your customers sit at the middle of that table. It's really, really important. Use stories, because stories are how we create emotional connection. And I don't mean stories in an old school marketing sense. Right, the way we used to do it, which is we wait until the end of a project. Corporate communication tells us we can't say anything while we're working on it. And at the very end, after all the executives have signed off on it, we issue a press release and we tie a pretty ribbon on it. That's not storytelling. Storytelling is as much about the process as it is about the outcome. If you share the stories of the work you're doing, not only internally, but externally, you can bring more people into the conversation. You can give them an opportunity to participate with you in the design. And let me close with what we call it our BIF genome. What it really is over all the years that I've been doing this work, there's a common set of characteristics that business model innovators share. that business model innovators share. And it fits under this rubric I call connect, inspire, transform. Connect because it's a team sport, right? You have to enable random collisions of unusual suspects. You have to get out of your silos. The gold for business model innovation is in the gray area between our silos. We hang around with far too many usual suspects. We can't learn anything that way. The only way we can learn anything new is if we collide with more unusual suspects. And you should do that more, and you should make that a strategic objective. Inspire. People do what they're passionate about. You've got to find a way not only to inspire the people in the organization to do transformational work, but the people outside of the organization. And storytelling can really help you with that. And transform, which I've talked about, is the difference between tweaks and transformation. Separate the objective of improving today's business model with the objective of designing and testing new business models. Because if you don't separate the objective for those two things, 100 out of 100 times, you will end up with incremental change to today's business model. Thank you very much.